So this week, we read the Torah portion, double Torah portion, Matot Maseh, a double parsha at the very end of the book of Numbers, the second to last book of the Torah. And because it's a double Torah portion, it covers a whole lot of ground. There's a lot of things that happen. Moses explains to the Israelites a lot of laws concerning vows made by men and women, the spoils of war, the inheritance by women, the difference between murder and manslaughter. Cities of refuge are established. If you want to join me for Torah study tomorrow, we're going to be talking all about that. Israel wages war against the Midianites, and the boundaries of the land of Israel, the Holy Land, are delineated, where each tribe is going to be. And two of the tribes, Reuven and Gad, are granted permission to stay on the other side of the Jordan because that's where they choose to stay. So you would think in 1 week's Torah portion covering that much ground would mean that every single line of text was jam-packed with brand new information, but there's something very peculiar about this week's parsha. It's repetition. For an entire chapter, Numbers 33, it delineates in extreme detail the Israelites' journey from the wilderness from Egypt to Jordan, which was literally just narrated for the rest of the books of Exodus and Numbers. So it's entirely superfluous. The Israelites set out from Ramses and encamped at Sukkoth. They set out from Sukkoth and encamped at Ethem, which is on the edge of the wilderness. They set out from Ethem and turned towards Pi-Hahiroth, which faces Baal-Zephon, and they encamped before Migdal, and so on and so forth for 50 verses, an entire chapter. This recap of the journey of the wandering Jews elaborates on all 42 places where the Israelites sojourned along their trek from slavery to freedom, all of which had already been described in detail as they took place. Rabbi Avram Saba, a 15th century Torah scholar, even writes about this parsha, "The reporting of these marches seems extraneous. There is nothing in the Torah that seems as superfluous as the recording of these marches in this week's parsha." As with everything in the Torah, whenever something seems repetitive, the rabbis always attribute meaning to it, because after all, the Torah is a perfect book in their eyes and would never contain anything extra. Repetition has to have a meaning. So why then does the Torah repeat what we already know this week? What can we make of yet another lengthy account of Israel's journey, the moments of respite, and its continued wanderings in the wilderness? Our rabbis offer numerous explanations of why it was important to recount the journey once more. So first, according to Rashi, Moses recounts all of these journeys to emphasize how little God had made the Israelites march, which sounds a little ridiculous given that I just told you how long it was, but follow with me. Rashi provides the math to back this up. So over the course of the 40 years that they were wandering, Rashi notes that the Israelites only went to 42 places in a pretty confined geographic area, and that when you account for the fact that 14 of those places that they visited were in their very first year when they were literally fleeing from Egypt, and that 8 of them were in the final year when they were hurrying to get to Israel, the Israelites actually went to 20 places in 38 years, which is hardly a grueling endeavor. I'm betting many people in this room have been to more than 20 places in less than 38 years. So Rashi asserts that this shows that God cared for the Israelites. According to him, the Torah repeats the details of the Israelites' journey to remind us of God's loving kindness, that during these 40 years, God didn't actually make them wander or travel that far. In his 12th century Guide to the Perplexed, Maimonides asserts a different argument, saying that this repetition is to highlight the miraculous nature of the Israelites' journey. Despite trekking through the desert for 40 years, the Israelites never truly lacked access to water or food, though they did like complaining about it, like all Jews do. Quite a wonder given the geography that they were in the desert. No matter the Israelites were on their journey, wells of water could always be found and food was always provided. According to Maimonides, the Torah's repetition serves to remind us of the capacity for miracles in the world. In the 15th century, Abarvanel, another rabbinic sage, suggested that this repetition was a sign of hope for the future. Just as God once liberated Israel from Egypt and provided for its journey of 40 years, so too, Abarvanel argued, will God act again in the future whenever the Israelites need it. According to Abarbanel, the Torah's repetition reminds us to have faith in redemption and that in the end, all will be okay. Around that same time, the 15th century, Sforno argued that Moses repeats this journey as a way of emphasizing the Israelites' piety and faith. Look at all these people went through to follow God's will, Sforno asserts. This group of people really listens to God and has really been through the ringer. And as a reward for their devout faith, they merit entering the land of Israel. So according to him, the Torah repeats the details of the Israelites' journey to remind us that God rewards those who journey and those who have faith in the path ahead. Taken together, our ancient rabbinic sages believe that the Torah's repetition grounds us in the importance of having faith in God, God's loving kindness, God's ability to make miracles, and also, most importantly, in our own ability as people to persevere through whatever comes our way and make it to the other side in a better place. More recently, modern Torah scholar Rabbi Shai Held of Machon Hadar asserts that this text also teaches us a powerful lesson about everyday life, the value of the journey itself. He states, "The text serves to remind us that even seemingly inconsequential stops on our journey, like those 42 places, can be powerful opportunities to serve God. Numbers 33 lists 42 places, some of them seemingly eminently forgettable, to teach a subtle but critical lesson. We can know God and serve God at every step along our way." According to Rabbi Held, the Israelites' journey is repeated to remind us that life is lived in the in-betweens, not only in the grand moments and conclusions, but along the way as we journey, meander, and stumble. Personally, I like to think that these interpretations are all more alike than they are different. They teach us about the value of having faith in God's loving kindness, the world's capacity for miracles, and in our own ability to persevere. At their core, each of these scholars offers a different perspective on what meaning we can make out of our own journeys. By reading Matot Maseh at this time of year, the Torah gives us an opportunity to consider how we reflect on and find meaning in our own lives. Summer is often a time for reflection. The old year is over, the new year hasn't quite started, we go on vacation maybe, and school year is about to begin. And as we enter the month of Av, actually today is Rosh Chodesh Av, and the high holidays in the Jewish year are fast approaching. The text, the Torah, teaches us this week that the start of the cycle of reflection is to ground in the tangible reality of where we have already been in our journey thus far, just like the Israelites. We prepare for the year ahead by thinking back to the last year and the many years before it. The repetition of Matot Maseh, extraneous though it may seem, is a guide to the first step when thinking about our growth. When you think about the great arc of the journey of your life, if you look for it, I hope that you can find proof of God's loving kindness. I hope that you can see miraculous moments where you found food and water, metaphorically speaking, when you didn't expect it. I hope that you can appreciate the moments when you hoped for the future and when you found your faith and piety, and moments that seemed inconsequential steps that actually led to amazing outcomes. I hope that you can see the holiness that you found along the way, just as the Israelites did. In the words of Emanu-El's very own Rabbi Alvin Fine, birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to desecration, and then, perhaps, to wisdom, from strength to weakness, from weakness to strength, or from strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from faith to fear, until, looking backwards or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high point along the way, but in having made the journey step by step, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred journey to life everlasting.